Hello everyone, Paul from Tuscany Tour Guide. Thanks for tuning in for another episode, this time again on Vino. It seems like many of you guys are liking the wine ones, so let's do a couple more because we have a few more awesome wines to talk about here in Tuscany. But before that, I want to thank everybody for having followed my Facebook Live on Michelangelo's David last Saturday. And if you're interested, you could follow my Zoom meeting this Saturday coming up, June 6th at noon Eastern Central Time. There's a minimal cost, so send me an email at paul@tuscantourguide.com to see if there's any more availability on that. There's going to be 8 people invited to do that. If there's more, we'll do a second session. Also, I wanted to thank everybody for subscribing. Make sure you click on the link below down here. If you're following from your cell phone, you're not going to see these links. You're going to see some more links on the top right-hand side from the past videos because I'm going to be talking about wines that I've already done. So let's get into it. We've done Chianti Classicos and Chiantis, and we know the difference between those. Good wines, great wines. We also done the Brunello di Montalcinos. We know that these are a little bit more specific, higher in price, and a very small geographical area in Tuscany. And this time we're going to talk about Bolgheri. Now let's get into the Bolgheri wines because they've become very, very, very famous and very hot items since 1990 more or less. It all began in Bolgheri, in a small town called Bolgheri, not far from Livorno. But once again, to the map to show you how small Italy is. So here we go. Italy is smaller than the state of California put together. And as we move on, we have Italy with Tuscany, which is the white triangular part. And there's Florence. We know that Chianti Classicos are made between Florence and Siena. Here's Montalcino where the Brunellos are made. And we're going to focus on Bolgheri, which is this little dot here right along the coast and along the Mediterranean. It's the province of Livorno. So this small town called Bolgheri only has 200 people who live in it. And this is the famous picture, or street, I should say, that leads you to the town of Bolgheri. It's 5 miles long, and it goes from the coast all the way to the castle of Bolgheri, right here. So this arch of the castle is actually the end of this beautiful cypress street. It's 5 miles long with 3,000 cypress trees alongside of it. And the Bolgheri Association or Consortium or Union of the Wines have this picture as their logo. Their head office is actually along this road as well. But if we get into the castle and we walk in, there's a small little quaint town full of wine shops where you could go and enjoy a glass of wine. But it all begins with this gentleman here with the hat on, Mario Incisa, right after World War II. Actually, World War II is still going on when he decides in 1944 to plant his Cabernet Sauvignon, which is a French wine, in his small little vineyard called Sassicaia. The kid next to him, really not a kid, but the adult, his Nicolas, his son, which today runs the whole show. But let's get into Mario and what he was trying to do. In 1944, he plants this vineyard called Sassicaia with Cabernet Sauvignon. And it was just meant to be a family owned wine just for them, their own consumption. Well, shortly after that, he liked it. Some people were liking it as well. So he started improving it. And in the 1970s, he appointed a gentleman called Giacomo Takis, who was an enologist. Now, if you watch some of my other videos, I mentioned that enologists are magicians when it comes to wine. They actually figure out which grape is good, which other grape, what kind of barrel to use, because different barrels give different tastes to the wine, what to do with the barrel, the size of the barrel. So Takis was an awesome addition to Mario's team to making the Sassicaia. But before we get into that, we have to understand the difference between table wines and quality wines, which are 2 different categories that are legal in Italy. Now, table wines are wines that typically are produced that follow no rules. So they do whatever they want, and they're typically not very good wines. They're usually very, very cheap, cheaper than water, believe it or not. And they follow no rules. So it's not a very good wine. The quality wines have labels: IGT, DOC, DOCG, which we've seen in the other videos with the Chiantis and the Brunellos. Now, Sassicaia and Mario Incisa and Nicola, his son, they weren't following any of these rules. They didn't want to follow any of these rules. They're using a French grape along the water. People thought he was crazy because you're importing a grape that's not ours. You're planting it in a rocky soil. By the way, sasso in Italian means rock. Sassicaia, rocky soil, a vineyard full of rocks. By the sea, with those ocean breezes, so the salt is going to get to these grapes. It's going to change the whole dynamics of the grapes. So people thought he was crazy, but he liked it. ends up other people started liking it, so they decided to hire the enologist. Well, in 1978, the enologist presents their table wine, because they don't follow any rules and they have no official labels to their Sassicaia wine. In 1978, they take part of a taste blind test with 30 other Bordeaux wines. Now, it makes sense to compare it to other Bordeaux wines because they're using the grape that Bordeaux wines use, which is the Cabernet Sauvignon. So in a blind test, all the judges rated Sassicaia number one. So the original people making the original Bordeaux wine from France lost against Mario and Chiza's wine made in Tuscany along the Mediterranean Sea with all these rocky soils that he has in his vineyards. So from there, 1978 is the year that it really took off. Said that now they don't want to be part and labeled as table wines, because don't forget, they're still not following rules. They're still table wines. So what they decided to do is adopt the name Super Tuscan that was invented by a journalist. But Super Tuscan doesn't sound so bad, does it? Better than table wine. So they started calling their wine Super Tuscan. They didn't want to just leave it at that. They wanted some notoriety with labels. So keep in mind, they're making white wines and rosés, and they were already DOCs. So they already had labels for the whites and the rosés, but not for the reds. Until 1992 comes into play, and they finally get their first label. A label on the neck of the bottle. Not the label on the bottle, but this right here, the small one where we have the DOCG or the DOC. Well, they get a label called IGT, which the government guarantees that the wine made for that bottle came from simply a specific place in the world. So IGT tells you that Sassicaia was made in Bolgheri. End of story. Very lax on what grapes you could use and the blends and the barrels. Well, come a few years later, in 1994, finally, DOC decides to adopt Bolgheri's wines. But there's rules and regulations. Bolgheri wines have to use Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, or Merlot. And they could use any amount that they want in that bottle. They could also use a Sangiovese or a Syrah at the most 50%. And then they could use any other grape that is appropriate to complement those others that I just mentioned, but no more than 30%, like Cabernet Verdot, for example. So they're very specific. Most of them are not Italian except for the Sangiovese, and those are the specific DOC rules that they have. Well, everything was going well until 2013, where it got better for Mario. Now, Mario's no longer with us, so his son is taking over. But it got better for Sassicaia because they actually decided to make their own DOC label from the government. So you have Bolgheri DOC, which, for example, you have here, and you don't have a label for this, but it says it underneath it, DOC, Denominazione di Origine Controllata. There's the three letters, Denominazione Origine Controllata, DOC, Bolgheri DOC. So the recipe I just told you about with the Cabernets, that's what you get in here. This is a great bottle, by the way. Il Bruciato, about $20 here in Italy. It could run you 25 to $50 anywhere in the States, but it's an awesome bottle of wine. But then you also have this Bolgheri DOC Sassicaia, which is 80% Cabernet Sauvignon, and it's only made by Tenuta San Guido, which is actually Mario and Chiza's. They're the only people in the world who could produce and use the name Sassicaia. It's all going well until the prices start getting put on the shelves. Now, I don't have one to show you because they start off at around $300 and they could go all the way to $600 depending on the vintage. When I say vintage, it's the year of the vintage. Certain years have you go from one star to 5 stars. And every year, Wine Spectator and many of these other wine magazines dedicate a star, or 1 to 5 stars, to the vintage of the wine. So if it rained too much, it's not going to be a 5-star. If it rained too little, it's not going to be a 5-star again. So if you get the right amount of rain, the right amount of sun, and so on and so forth, you get a 5-star. The last 5-star year was 2015. So the 2015 Sassicaia is literally astronomically priced in your liquor shops if you could get it, because they only make 130,000 bottles in Sassicaia, and they come from a very small part of Bolgheri, which is only one vineyard. They're not different vineyards planting the same grape and putting them together. It's just one little eeny-weeny vineyard in Bolgheri producing 130,000 bottles, and that's it. It's got to be put in a barrique for 2 years, and out of those 2 years, it's got to stay in a specific barrel called a barrique for at least 18 months. So let me show you these barriques. So there's Mario and his son. There's a Sassicaia 2015 that I just mentioned before. And this is their cantina, as we call it. And you can see their barrels that have their name on it, Sassicaia. And the trick on getting all the different flavors in these wines is quite complex. Not only do you have to have the right kind of grape and blend, but then it also comes into where you're going to put that wine and how long you're going to keep it there. And in Bolgheri, they all designated that all their wine, the Bolgheri DOC or the Bolgheri Sassicaia DOC, have to be placed in barriques. And a barrique is a very specific kind of barrel, which, believe it or not, I have one in my house. I have two of them. I have two of them because I bought them to make some tables outside. So check this out. Here's one. There's another. I made actually tables with it. Put a piece of glass on it. And what we have is the name of the company who makes it. And we have what type of process it took to make this barrel. Well, what I'm trying to get at is that they're toasted on the inside. Barrels are toasted in a very simple way, which goes back to this picture I wanted to show you here. They actually put a fire inside the barrel while they're making it so that they crisp the inside of the barrel, and in turn you'll get vanilla flavors and chocolate flavors. So when you hear people sipping the wine and then saying, oh, I taste a little vanilla, I taste a little chocolate, that all comes down to how the barrel was toasted, besides the fact that you have these grapes that are complemented by those burnt, because that's what it is, they're really burning the inside of the barrel. So it's very complex, but it's awesome where this guy in 1944 called Mario Incisa started this family-owned wine thing for himself to enjoy, and thanks to the magician called the enologist, they started becoming the best wine almost in the world, because in 2015, Sassicaia was rated #1 in the entire world from Wine Spectator. So pretty big achievements coming from a simple man that lived during World War II. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you subscribe down here. I hope you watch the other wine videos, and I hope to see you next week or on Saturday morning at noon Eastern Standard Time for my Zoom video about Michelangelo's David. Just send me an email, see if there's any more availability. So long, take care, and it was great talking to you about vino again. Bye-bye.